Hello, let's start the fifth lecture. Today we're going to learn about str type called strings. We've already dealt with strings many times in previous lectures. A string is an ordered sequence of characters. Strings in Python can be expressed using single and double quotation marks. It is also possible to create strings that span multiple lines by using triple quotation marks. Strings are made up of strings. It may sound strange, but in Python, every character is a string. Let's learn some special characters. First, let's look at the new line character. The new line character \n is used to represent a new line in the Python string. It is also called line feed, line break, new line, and is used with a backslash to distinguish it from the character n. Execute the code shown in the slide and see how the string is printed when the string containing \n is printed. Tabs visible on the keyboard can also be expressed as string. The tab character is also used with a backslash to distinguish it from the letter T. For example, in my str, 3 characters A, \t, and B exist in order. Each character in the string can be accessed using square brackets. You can think of an index as numbered position for each character in a string. The index starts at 0 and ends at length -1 of the string. For example, in the Python shell, declare a variable called myString with the value hello. If you enter myString square bracket 0, the first letter H appears. If you enter myString square bracket 4, the last character O is displayed. As mentioned earlier, in Python, even a single character is a string. Therefore, when you print the 0 index of the string, H is printed. When you print the whole string, H is printed again. When you pass a string as an argument to the len function, the length function returns the length of the string. For example, putting the string hello into the length function returns 5. Let's print all characters in the string one by one. Assign the value Python to the variable myString and initialize I to 0. Execute the while loop until I is less than the length of myString. Print each character in the string myString using I as the index. Increment I by 1 and continue the iteration. Note that if I is not incremented by 1, the same character is printed indefinitely. If you run this program, you can see that the element of the string is printed per line. You can also iterate over a string using a for statement instead of a while statement. In the for statement, each character is stored sequentially in the variable between for and in, and the variable can be used in the loop. For example, for char in myString, in the slide means that each character of the variable myString is assigned to the char variable in order, and the code below is repeated until char becomes the last character of the string. Using what we've learned so far, let's write a function char_count that takes in char in and string in, that counts the number of specific characters in the string. The character count function counts the number of this character char in and string in. For example, when O and floopy are passed in char count, 2 is returned because there are 2 O in the string floopy. For example, we can implement the function using a for loop like this. First, we initialize a variable named ct to 0 and traverse the string in string using a for loop. Assign each character to a variable called char and add 1 to ct if char is equal to char in. And when the for loop is finished, just return the variable ct. I will explain how the function works through an example. For example, as shown in the slide, we can call char counter function with the strings o and pop as arguments. First, char in and string in are initialized by the given argument, and ct is initialized to 0. When the for loop is executed, p is first placed in the variable char. Since the value of char is different from char in, the conditional statement is not executed. In the next iteration, char becomes o. Since char and char in are the same, the code in the conditional statement is executed, and the value of ct is incremented by 1. In the next iteration, char becomes p. Since char is different from char in, the condition will be false. The iteration ends and ct is returned. In this case, the value of ct is 1, so 1 is returned. So 1 is eventually printed. What if we want to access part of a string, a substring? In this case, we can use slicing. Python provides a feature called slicing that can be used to get the value of a part of a sequence. Let's see how to use this feature. In Python, parts of a string can be accessed using square brackets and a colon. You can get a part of a string by putting the start index to the left side of the colon and the end index to the right side of the colon. If you put the start index to the left of the colon and put end index to the right of the colon as shown in the slide, you can get a substring which spans the characters at the start index of the string to the character at the index right before the end index. For example, the value of my string 2 is a, the value of my string 9 is a question mark, and the value of my string 8 is p. So my string 2 colon 9 returns at'(s) space up. If the last index is not given after the colon, it returns the substring from the starting index to the end of the string. If no index is given in the colon, the entire string is returned. And if the starting index is not attached, the substring from the beginning to the last index minus 1 of the string is returned. In Python, strings are immutable types. This means that it is impossible to change the contents of a string variable. For example, when there is a value hello in the string variable myString, if you try to replace the first character h with y, an error occurs. However, as shown in the slide, if you reassign a new string to a variable, it is possible to store another string in the variable. In Python, it is also possible to concatenate 2 or more strings together. We can concatenate 2 strings using the plus operator, just like when performing arithmetic operations. For example, when there are 2 string variables, myString and myString2, these 2 strings can be combined using the plus operator. In Python, you can also check whether a specific character or string is inside a string. The in keyword is a keyword used to determine if one string exists within another. For example, to check the string fun exists in the string myString with the value Python is fun, you can write an expression fun in myString. Conversely, if you use the keyword not in, you can check that one string is not inside another. Unlike data types such as int and float, the string type has various built-in functions. Various built-in functions that can be used within a data structure are called methods. Let's take a look at the frequently used string methods. Upper and lower are functions that convert all letters in the string to uppercase and lowercase respectively and return them. The find function is a function that returns the starting index of a substring when the substring is given as an argument to the function. The ends with method is a function that determines whether an original string ends with the string argument. It returns true if the string ends with an argument string. The split function splits the string by the given separator character and returns the split strings as a list. In addition to these methods, there are many more string methods. However, you do not need to know all of the string methods, and you can always search for the methods from the search engines when you need them. You can check more string methods and how to use them through the link in the slide. If you use the find method, you can find the starting index of an argument character or substring. Append .find to the whole string, open parentheses, then put the string you want to find as the first argument. The next two parameters are variables that set the index range in which to find the string. For example, if 8 is passed for the last index, the existence of the argument string is searched only up to the index 7 of the string. Let's learn how to use the find method through an example. If the string "I'm a computer scientist" is in the variable myString, you can use the find method to find where the character P is. It is possible to search not only character, but also the starting index of a string, such as computer. MyString.find I,3 finds and returns the index of string I after the index 3 of myString. MyString.find I317 is the code to find the index of I between the index 3 to the index 16 of myString. In this case, myString 3:17 is "am a computer s", so the string I cannot be found in it. In this case, the find method returns -1. The replace method is a function that can be used to replace a specific character or a part of a string. The count parameter is an optional variable that can be used to specify the number of substrings to be replaced with an argument string from the beginning of the string. If the count argument is not passed, all old strings appearing in the entire string are replaced with new strings. Let's look at an example. Let's say there's a string myString with the value of "Python is not easy." When you call the method myString.replace O, E, all the O in myString are replaced with E, and the new string will be returned. It is also possible to replace the substring of 2 or more characters, and if the count value is set to 1 in the last line of code, only the first O among all searched O will be replaced with E. The string.split method splits the string by the separator given in the argument and returns the split substrings as a list. For example, if myString is the string "My name is Bobby", myString.split space will split the string based on the space character. Then, these space-separated strings are returned as a list. You can put -1 as the index of the string. Run the code on the string. You will see O printed on the screen. The index -1 means the last index of the string. However, an index such as -2 does not exist. Let's learn about comments. Comments are kind of notes that are not executed in a program. When the Python interpreter executes the Python code, it does not execute comments. Using comments to describe your code makes it easier for others to understand your code, and it is also helpful when you review your code later. First, let's see how to write a one-line comment. The Python interpreter comments out everything after the sharp on a line in the code. For example, if you run the code on the screen, only 2 is printed. Since print2 and printhello are written behind sharp, only print 1 + 1 is recognized and executed as code. When writing a multi-line comment, You can enclose the comment in triple-double quotation marks. In this case, you can comment out multiple lines of text. For example, if you run the program shown in the slide, only 3 and 4 are printed. This is because the middle 2 lines of the code are commented out. You may have experienced errors due to mistakes when writing programs. Errors or mistakes that cause a computer program to stop working or not work as intended are called bugs. The process of finding and fixing these bugs are called debugging. Let's learn how to debug a program to help you study and program in the future. A debugger is a software that helps you find bugs. It is a software that can control the running program. Debugger stops the program during execution and analyzes the program state. You can also use a debugger in VS Code. Now, let's take a brief look at how to use it. Debugger usually runs with breakpoints. So first, we need to set out where to stop before we run the debugger. Open the source file you want to debug in VS Code and set breakpoints on the left side of the code. Breakpoints can be set in several lines, and when it is activated, you will see a red dot on the left. Breakpoints that are activated can be deactivated by pressing the dot again. Debugging can be started in a number of ways. For example, start through the drop-down menu at the Run Python File button at the top right, or you can start it through the Start Debugging button in the Run menu. When you start debugging, the program runs. Python Debug Console is activated in the terminal window of VS Code, and the program proceeds. When the program reaches a breakpoint, the program stops, and we can check the variables existing in the program at the breakpoint line. These variables can be checked in the Run and Debug window on the left. To continue executing the code, click the Continue button. If you want to stop debugging and end the debugger, just click the Stop button. Now, let's solve an example. If there is a character value in a string in, implement the function find that returns the index of the first occurrence of value in. However, if value in does not exist in string in, return -1. Let's look at an example answer. First, initialize the variable called index to 0. And loop through all the characters in the string one by one using a for loop. And if the element in the string is equal to value in, the index is returned immediately. If not, it continues the iteration by incrementing the variable index by 1. In this way, the loop continues until value in is found. If the iteration finishes without returning something, return -1. Next, let's put an optional parameter in the find function we implemented. An optional parameter is a parameter that does not need to be set when calling a function. Add an optional parameter called start, and implement the function find that returns the index where value in exists after the start index. For optional parameters, a default value must be specified. So in the find function we want to create, let's set the default value of start to 0 and implement the function. For example, we can implement the program as shown in the slide. First, initialize the index variable to 0. Then, every character in string in is checked one by one. However, the conditional expression is changed so that the condition becomes true only when the value of the char variable and value in are the same and index is equal to or greater than start. For example, if you call find meme e2 and print the return value of that function, 3 is printed. Since index 2 of the string meme is the second m, the character e is searched starting from that index 2. So index 3 of the second e is returned, not index 1 of the first t. This is all for today. Next time we will learn about types and recursion.